Thank you, Camilo. Yes, as Camilo mentioned to our media friends and those watching us on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube, we'll try to get your questions later. We also have joining with us today reactors from various key cities. A regular Mr. Ed Pancha from Figueroa, I think he's joining us on Zoom. Mr. Rico Osmeña from Cebu. Des Padla from Cagayan de Oro, another key cities. We'll try to get these questions later after the presentations have been delivered. I will be the next to give a short reflection. I was asked by Captain Laurel to write an article reflecting on the 9th anniversary of the 2016 arbitration as well. I'm being alone, a regular moderator here for the Asian Century Philippine DZXL Institute. I'm a writer for the Asian Century Journal, contributor to Sunstar Davao, and regular media and news delegate to China. So the title of my, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. This is just a short reading. So the article I've submitted for the Asian Century Philippines is entitled "Bullet Trains, Not Bullets," and Prosperity, No Proxy. So, Philippine Defense Secretary Diego Chodoro has been at the forefront of Manila's national security strategy, seeking Western military support to counter China's assertion of sovereignty over its claims in the South China Sea. He has welcomed the U.S. proposal to build an ammunition production facility in Subic Bay and even challenged China to surrender its nuclear weapons recently. Talks are even underway to acquire warships, used warships from Japan. And the Philippines also recently signed defense agreements, defense pacts with newfound European partners. The United States, Australia, India, and Japan have also, the Quad countries have also rebuked China's aggressive actions in the disputed South China Sea. Sorry, the defense pacts are with New Zealand, Germany, and even the small nation of Lithuania. Certain congressmen hailed the signing of these defense agreements with European countries and called for more, hoping to quote, isolate China before the international community. In my view, we must not be reading the room because the international community is not just G7, it's not just the West, it's not just NATO. In fact, what people call the rest, the global majority or the global south of developing countries, is increasingly critical of the US's abandonment of the global free trade norms and its imposition of reciprocal tariffs. Just a few days ago, the United States slapped on the Philippines 20% reciprocal tariffs, with the Prime Minister of Singapore, Wong, also criticizing the moves of Trump to impose reciprocal tariffs on the world, and even recently going to China to share that the partnership, Singapore-China partnership, is more important than ever. Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, led by Saudi Arabia, were also united in condemning the US's bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities last month. And China is the primary trading partner for over 60% of the world's countries. Philippines itself, as Captain Laura mentioned earlier, is a signatory to the ASEAN's Zone of Peace, Freedom, Neutrality Declaration and the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapons Free Zone Treaty. The moves of the national security establishment of the Philippine government seeks to, by its actions, undermine this status quo. If we let us recall that the spokesman of the United Nations in 2016, Stefan Dujarric, or then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, made it already clear that the United Nations holds, quote, no position on the legal and the procedural merits of the South China Sea arbitration victory claimed by us, claimed by Manila. The IHO, the International Hydrographic Organization, the world's official body for charting and naming the seas, still refer to our asserted West Philippine Sea as the quote South China Sea. And even the 2025 U.S. Annual Threat Assessment Report of the U.S. Intelligence Community, the Office of the Director of the National Intelligence of the United States, published in March 2025, does not use the term West Philippine Sea and refers to the area simply as the disputed South China Sea. In light of growing hunger, unemployment, and poverty in the nation, I humbly submit that the national energy of the state should be redirected toward fostering economic growth and development. This can be achieved through the pursuit of an uninterrupted, quote, comprehensive strategic cooperation and partnership and win-win cooperation with our superpower neighbor China, instead of acting as a proxy for Western neo-colonial, that's the term Kamendong used earlier, militarism, by setting up theaters of war and triggering an arms race against an imagined threat of foreign invasion. I sincerely doubt that enriching the pockets of the U.S. military-industrial complex serves the national interest. Instead of hosting bullet factories, why not procure bullet trains to ensure reliable and modern public transportation? Indonesia, thanks to Chinese loans, became the first ASEAN country to operate high-speed trains. Meanwhile, the fate of the Mindanao Railway and Bicol Express hangs in the balance. Chinese loans for these projects were rejected, and the current administration has yet to find alternative sources of funding, abandoning the people's right to modern public transportation. The United States has 0 high-speed rail systems. China, by contrast, has over 45,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, the largest and fastest network in the world, with trains operating at 350 kilometers per hour. The previous administration bore the fruits of its partnership with China, a 382% increase in foreign investments, millions of tourists, growth in agricultural exports, bananas, durians, coconuts, training in hybrid rice technology, and critical infrastructure development for both urban and rural areas. This trickled down to the common people through bridges in Binondo, Pasig, and Davao, a dam for Metro Manila, irrigation projects in Pangasinan and Cagayan, and improved communication services via a new telco provider, namely Depot. Before it was unilaterally shipped, there was even a proposed 60-40 joint underwater oil and gas venture to sustain our country's energy needs. Kamintong said that in the 20th Congress, he is hopeful that there will be assertion of independent foreign policy and neutral view. This is welcome. We welcome the suggestion of newly elected or re-elected Senator Tito Soto, who advised President Marcos Jr. to pursue the 60-40, the joint oil and gas venture in the South China Sea to resolve manage the dispute. In contrast to what has happened in the previous administration, Manila now seeks a long-term loan from Washington to purchase 20 F-16 fighter jets and other defense equipment. But can military bases, bullet ammo dumps, and missile launchers feed empty stomachs and quench thirsty throats? So long as the U.S. continues to pursue its foreign policy of, quote, the pivot to Asia, which seeks to shift 60% of its navy to militarily contain and economically block the rise of China in the region, China will never surrender its nuclear deterrent. China possesses the world's largest reserves of rare earth minerals, critical minerals, which are vital to the U.S.'s green energy transition. While the South China Sea may be to China what the Caribbean is to the United States, they have no Monroe Doctrine, which means they do not seek to dominate the area. Historically, China has not been expansionist. During the Middle Ages, China possessed the world's largest navy, but chose to dismantle it, never embarking on 5 centuries of colonization like the Western powers, European powers. According to the political scientist M. Taylor Fravel, China has resolved 17 out of 23 territorial disputes. That's 88%. That's an 88% resolution rate since World War II, demonstrating a commitment to diplomacy over confrontation and military armed conflict. In 15 of these 17 resolved cases, the disputes were settled with China offering significant compromises over the territory being contested. This, in my view, exposes the conventional fear in the Philippines we have today of a Chinese invasion as misguided. What we call the APCOY, or the pro-American hermeneutic interpretation of the 2016 arbitral award, has actually been adverse to Philippine national interests. For 9 years, it has tied the hands of our leaders, preventing alignment with the ASEAN Southeast Asian Consensus of diplomacy and constant dialogue in the resolution of territorial disputes. In my view, the award is a Pyrrhic victory. It's a paper tiger. The Philippines lost its claim, as what was demonstrated earlier, to the Spratlys as an archipelago. You can check that out in paragraph 574, specifically of the award. Scarborough Shoal, or Bajo de Masinloc, was downgraded to a, quote, traditional fishing ground to be shared by Vietnamese, Chinese, and Taiwanese neighboring coastal states. That's paragraph 805 of the award. And China's historical claims to the islands were never invalidated. That's paragraph 272. These are important passages. The ruling was declaratory, not injunctive. It did not order, which means it did not order China to do anything. It did not order China to vacate the islands and features that they occupied in the Spratlys. It did not order China to vacate Scarborough Shoal, nor did it recognize Philippine ownership over Scarborough Shoal. That's paragraph 814. While we must, of course, as Filipinos, push to continue asserting our claims in the South China Sea, in the Spratlys and Scarborough Shoal, we should not allow this dispute to define the 99% of our bilateral relations with China, especially if it obstructs our path to improving our living standards. China has lifted 800 million people, of its own people, from poverty in only 40 years. That is something we should learn. If you look at the practice of our neighbors, Thailand now has mutual visa exception with China and Thailand to improve tourism, commerce, and trade. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, recently, there was a resolution filed by what we call the West Philippine Sea bloc of traditionally yellow politicians to suspend specific sister city agreements or sister province agreements with China. This is something that we are the only country in the region that is pursuing. China remains the engine of development in ASEAN and the rest of the world. Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs, Frederick Guo, recently protested the U.S.'s imposition of trade tariff, the U.S. 20% of reciprocal tariffs on the Philippines. But just a few weeks ago, he announced that the U.S. government has assured him that the Luzon Economic Corridor, an infrastructure project linking Subic, Clark, Manila, and Batangas, has not been abandoned. But the way I see it, G7's ambitious alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, which we abandoned 2 years ago under this administration, remains little more than a glorified pledge. We have yet to see any tangible project breaking ground. Washington's promises of a military and economic support to Manila, in my view, are fool's gold. They've been selling us the Brooklyn Bridge since the end of the Second World War. What reason is there to trust in them now? Why has the U.S. not signed a free trade agreement with Manila? Would a true ally want tariff-free exports from the Philippines instead of slapping 20% of tariffs on us? Let us not forget that we spent billions a few decades ago on the nuclear power plant in Bataan for construction, maintenance, and debt servicing, and yet has never powered even a single light bulb. Filipino fishermen are actually complaining about the disruptions in their livelihood caused by the Balikatan US-Philippines military exercises. Even retired US Admiral Harry Harris Jr., who was the former commander of the US Indo-Pacific Command, admitted in a May 2024 interview that the US does not recognize Philippine sovereignty, ownership, or administration over Scarborough Shoal or any part of the Spratlys, including those in our exclusive economic zone. This is not surprising given that the US has never even ratified the UN Law of the Sea in their domestic law. So to me, this casts doubt on their so-called ironclad commitment, which we hear a lot, to our defense under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. I end by submitting that this status quo is untenable and must come to an end. As Vice President Sara Duterte has often lamented, we are being left behind by our neighbors in Southeast Asia. The only viable path forward is to pursue an independent foreign policy, she says, one that enables us to be friends with all nations. But I'd like to add that we should be friends with all peace-loving nations and grow economically with them. While we spend all of our time chasing a phantom enemy, Cambodia has already surpassed us in tourist arrivals, and Vietnam has overtaken us in GDP, gross domestic product per capita. 4 decades of Western neoliberal economics, debt-driven, exploitative, usurious, and rooted in a goal of depopulation, have been disastrous for the middle and working class of this country. Militarism would only worsen these conditions. Are we to settle for an economy built on gambling, call centers, and the extraction of our natural resources? This economic model has left the nation at the mercy of banks, multinational corporations, and foreign interests and colonial powers that exploit our society and plunder our way of life with impunity. Thank you very much.